The novel Notes from Underground is often cited as one of the first existentialist novels, portrayed through the unreliable narrator, the underground man himself. So, how is existentialism conveyed through the philosophies of the underground man in the novel Notes from Underground? In order to do this, I will consider a couple of facets of the philosophy of existentialism. First, I will define the meaning of the word the absurd. So in philosophy, the absurd refers to the conflict between, first, the human inherent tendency to seek value and meaning in life, and second, the human inability to find any. So in this context, absurd does not mean logically impossible, but rather humanly impossible. This arises by the contradictory nature of human mind and the universe existing simultaneously. So this is shown through the underground man's rejection of rationalism and scientific perfection. The underground man refuses to pursue a traditionally meaningful path of life. He states, "I couldn't manage to make myself nasty or, for that matter, friendly, honest, or crooked, a hero or an insect. Now I'm living out my life in a corner, trying to console myself that only a stupid, useless man cannot turn himself into anything, that only a fool can make anything he wants out of himself." So the first aspect of existentialism that I want to consider is facticity. So the definition of facticity is all of the concrete details against the background of which human freedom exists and is limited. So what does this mean? First and foremost, the easiest way to look at facticity is a collection of facts that are almost preset by your existence. But not just your existence, but the existence of your freedom. For example, suppose someone is born without legs. That person's facticity will not include taking long walks on the beach. Some preset force, a physical condition that has existed arguably even before that person was born, has dictated that said person's freedom of activity is limited. However, facticity can change and even expand depending on what happens in the future. Now, say in that same universe, new technology develops so that they're able to grow new legs for people. So that person's set facticity will no longer exclude activities like taking long walks on the beach. So it is important to note that facticity is not a set number of rules, but rather modifiable and subjective to change. So why is this important when considering the underground man? One could argue that the underground man is constantly stuck in the past. However, I want to suggest that the underground man is not only stuck in the past, but also in the future. He cannot make decisions in the present because he is constantly overthinking, constantly wondering, what will happen after I've done this? The future dictates every single one of his decisions and actions, and he's incapable of separating the two. During one of the most climactic moments in the novel, he states, "Where is she going? Why am I running after her?" I thought, why? To go down on my knees before her, to sob with remorse, to kiss her feet, to beg her to forgive me. I was longing to do it. My breast was bursting. I never once again thought of that moment without emotion. But what for? I thought. Won't I hate her even more tomorrow just because I've kissed her feet today? As though I could really give her any sort of happiness. As though I hadn't found out today for the 100th time what I'm truly worth. There is an obvious shift in this quote from the underground man. At first, he is obviously emotionally distressed and experiencing strong emotions. He even states that he has never again thought of that moment without emotion. But then he pulls himself back. He removes himself from the situation and considers the future. Maybe I made the right decision by pulling back now, he thinks, especially since things wouldn't have worked out anyway. So this is one of the inherent flaws in the philosophy of the underground man. By looking at facticity, we can see that it's really about how our past self influences our current self, and how our future self is built from the actions that we have made in the past, and the actions that we are currently making. We cannot say that we are only our past, and nothing else, because that would be completely disregarding a large part of human nature, which is our ability to change. However, more importantly, we cannot completely ignore our past, as that would be ignoring a large part of what has contributed to us today. The underground man lacks this connectedness between our past and our present and his future. Existentialism tells us that no matter what happens tomorrow, it will have been inevitably caused by what we have done today. It is we that create our future, and with it, our reality. So that brings me to the next facet of existentialism, which is authenticity. Authentic existence is the idea that man creates himself and must live according to those values, that self that he has created. Living authentically means living according to only yourself and not according to your genes, for example, or a higher power. The authentic act is the one that acts in accordance with one's freedoms. So what does this mean, and why is this important when we look at existentialism and the underground man? Consider this. The opposite of living authentically would be living inauthentically. That is, in accordance to other values. The underground man provides his opinion on this fairly clearly, stating, "A man always and everywhere prefers to act in the way he feels like acting, and not in the way his reason and interests tell him. For it is very possible for a man to feel like acting against his interests, and in some cases, I say that he positively wants to act this way." So what exactly does the underground mean by reason and interest? This brings us to two of the major motifs of this novella, irrationality and autonomy. Reason refers to rationality. One of the underground man's main criticisms for utopian society is the fact that man cannot be defined and pursued using scientific law, because man does not follow a certain set of rules. And interest refers to what one ought to do, like when you act in accordance to something of your best interests. So the underground man states, one's own free, unrestrained choice, one's own whim, be it the wildest, one's own fancy, sometimes worked up to a frenzy, that is one of the most advantageous advantages that cannot be fitted into any table or scale, and that causes every system and every theory to crumble to dust on contact. And where did those sages pick up the notion that man must have something that they feel is a normal and virtuous set of wishes? What makes them think that man's will must be reasonable and in accordance with his own interests? All man actually needs is independent will at all costs and whatever the consequences. So this point of view aligns perfectly with the idea of authenticity. The underground man clearly gives his opinion on how man should and does live irrationally. So what of autonomy? Should man be allowed to govern himself? Well, the underground man believes that since others can never truly understand what he or I might be feeling, they have no basis and no right to exert upon them a force on which they wish them to live that. Thus, the only option is autonomy, that self-governing is the only way all of our irrationalities can exist. And what does reason know, the underground man states? It knows only what it has had time to learn. Many things will remain unknown to it. Now, human nature is just the opposite. It acts as an entity, using everything it has, conscious and unconscious, and even if it deceives us, it lives. So, the last interesting point to consider is one that actually another philosopher brings up, Immanuel Kant. He states, all people are born with an intrinsic worth which makes them valuable of all price. He thinks that lying corrupts a human being's ability to choose free and rationally, and lies rob other people of their freedom, and it robs them of their dignity and autonomy. So this is interesting because the underground man lies constantly and without shame. He admits several times to blatantly lying to the readers, like, "I was lying just now when I said I used to be a nasty official, and I lied out of spite." Or, at the beginning of the novella, "I'd feel better if I could only believe something of what I've written down here, but I can't believe a single word of it." But there exists a paradox in what Kant believes from an existentialist view, specifically in the statement, "Lies rob others of their freedom to choose rationally." In the end, even though the underground man continuously reminds us that human nature can be irrational and that existentialism contains the freedom to choose the absurd, so too can you choose the rational, and in fact, many people do. We must remember that the underground man, although very philosophical and very determined, is an unreliable narrator. The fact that he lies to us does not diminish the value of what he says, but it certainly leaves the door open for more analysis. In fact, in the end, we are not all the underground man, although he might surface in familiar faces and personalities. So going back to one of the points I made during facticity, we create our own reality. I create my own reality, and the one I choose is the one I live by, and so too for all of us.